This again. Okay, welcome one and all. We're on Chav Chet Amud Bet at the Mishnah. Let's pick up where we left off, and this is a perfect Mishnah to pick up in Chodesh Elul. Just a word of programming. There'll be a total maximum 3 shiurim in Elul, and then I got to close it out because the last week, the week right before Rosh Hashanah, happy and bitter experience both have taught me that week is sweeps week. There's too much going on congregationally, and this year, of course, more than most. The Mishnah Chav Chet Amud Bet is already one of the keys to the observance of the mitzvah of Sukka, and I hope everyone's pressing record for themselves in terms of being able to use this for Divrei Torah throughout Sukkos. You can present basic concepts in the observance of the mitzvah, and you have the background. If you've been with us, you've been learning together this year, in the beginning of Masech, or even just in Parak Bet, some of the basic notions of the construct of a sukkah. And now, since Chav Zayin Amud Aleph 27a, we're talking about the observance of the mitzvah of Yeshiva B'Sukkah. Kol Shivat Hayamim Adam Osa Sukkato Keva Ubeito Arai. This is the headquarters of what we've actually seen quoted in the Gemara a number of times. The 7 days of Sukkot, your house should be the fixed dwelling place. Your home should be the intermittent or temporary seeming dwelling place. And we've seen a lot about this already in various contexts in our learning throughout. And Rashi just tells us Sukkato Keva. What is the Keva part? Liot kol ikar dirato ba. Most of the dwelling should take place within it, in that context, in that place. What we'll see in the Gemara, and that'll be tonight's topic. How does one demonstrate that this is their fixed place of living? We already know from previous experience, obviously the eating, obviously the sleeping. That we've talked about already, pages 27 and 28a through to 28b. So now we'll see other ideas related to this. For some reason, one of our chaverim is texting me he can't get on. Hold on, we are on. Please, sorry, someone's trying to get on. So you can log in under... okay. Sorry about that delay, but it's Ira and he wants to come join us for the learning. So he just texted me. He's stuck. Okay. Yardu Geshamim, if it's raining, Me'ematai mutter lifanot. When does one, or lifnot rather, when does one emerge from the sukkah if it's raining? How much rain? Mishat tisrach hamakpeh, from the time that some kind of a porridge would be destroyed as a result of the rain. Mashlu lama davar doma. There's an analogy to which this can be likened. And what is that? Le'eved sheba limzo kos l'rabo v'shafach lo kiton al panav. Many of us familiar with this story, and we thought we saw it maybe from a book of Midrashim. It's from the Mishnah. It's found in a halachic context that it gives you the mashal. A servant was asked to bring a cup of water to his master, and when he brought it to the master spilled it in his face. The truth is, the Gemara helped me to understand this story, because otherwise there is actually a question about who's who in the story. Who's splashing the water on who?
It's the water, yeah.
Yeah, but for our purposes, the rain is the master spilling the water onto the servant's head to tell the servant he's not interested in his service. So it goes. Yeah. We shouldn't be tested with such a thing. Obviously, we have to understand this based on our living in a place where it's not impossible that it rains. The main place the Mishnah speaks about, of course, is Eretz Yisrael. That's the base of operations for all intents and purposes. So in that case, that's when it refers to this kind of a mashal. Rashi just points out that there is an ambiguity in the story here. The Gemara will explain who spills upon who. Yeah, I think you see that there. So we'll understand a little bit better when we finally get to that section. Okay, let's look together at the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan kol shivat hayamim adam osa sukkato keva ubeito arai. A person 7 days makes their house, their sukkah rather, their fixed dwelling, and their house has been reduced basically to being a place of temporary dwelling. Ketza. Now we're waiting for the Gemara. I would have been waiting for the Gemara to repeat again what we've seen before, and that is that a person should eat in the sukkah, a person should sleep in the sukkah where that's possible, but that's not what it says. Instead, what do we have? We have a description of a way in which somehow there is a physical, structural piece that you add to the sukkah after it's built, after it's ready, after you've already sat down in it basically to enjoy it. That's not going to be enough. There's other things, and that has to do with housewares. That which typifies, now, I'll spare you the musar. We could all do a little better with this. Meaning, people go to the sukkah, everything's paper and plastic. Everything's disposable. No one brings, actual fancy things into the sukkah.
But,
you don't have it. But really, that's Eddie, what did you say? I'm sorry?
I said it, but it's usually the good plastic.
Ah, it's the best. I always hear that saying. It's the best plastic we got. Okay, yeah, what do I tell you? But here, let's look at it right here. So the first things on the list: Ketzer, Haylo Kelim Naim, Ma'alan LaSukkah, Mitzaot Naot, Ma'alan LaSukkah. You have nice vessels, bring them to the sukkah. You have nice mats, bring them up to the sukkah. Ochel v'shotu matayal b'sukkah, and you eat and you drink and you make a little tiyul in the sukkah, pacing in the sukkah, walking around in the sukkah. Assuming one has a large enough sukkah, they can do that. But the point is, you're hanging around in the sukkah. As the Torah declares, Teshvu, Basukot Teshvu, Shivatim Kol Ezrach Yeshvu Basukot. So you shall dwell as you dwell. Sit in the sukkah, live in the sukkah, as you would normally live in your home. Mikan Amru. From here was it learned. Kol Shivat Hayamim Ose Adam Sukkato Keva Ubeito Arai. And in other words, quoting it now from a Braita, right? Ketzad, it's repeating. Ketzad, Haylo, Kelim, Na'im, Ma'al L'Sukkah. Mitzaot Na'ot, Ma'al L'Sukkah. Ochel, V'shotu, Matal B'Sukkah. And then it adds an extra clause. After all the other things you do in the Sukkah, it throws in an important aspect of Jewish life. U'mishanin B'Sukkah. You should learn Torah in the Sukkah. The Gemara asks, however, is that really true? Is that accurate? Eini, v'ha'amar Rava, mikra umitna b'metalalata. Rava says you can have your mikra means learn your Torah shibichtav. Your mitna means learn your Mishnah. That can be in the sukkah. V'tanui bar mimetalalata. But your actual learning, meaning putting together the pieces, that you should do outside of the sukkah. Now, when Rava lived, there was no Gemara. He actually is the Gemara. I mean, there's no book, right? So Rava says, when you want to put the pieces of the Mishnayot and the Braito together and analyze them in depth, you have to go outside of the sukkah. You won't be able to do it in the sukkah. It's a strange thing to say. That's what he declares. So the Gemara says basically, well, how could we have a Braita that claims Umishanin b'sukkah, learn in the sukkah, and yet the next line is Rava saying, yeah, but not the heavy stuff. Lo kashya, says the Gemara, Lamed Kuf, lo kashya, haba migras, haba iyuni. The Gemara, just fascinating. You learned that in the days of the Gemara, they already had a discussion that was going back and forth between Bekiyut and Be'iyun. If you're going to learn things b'migras means an individual is simply learning in it's not that it's superficial, it's that you're engaged in review work or the basic surface work. So if that's what you're doing, you're reviewing something, you know it already, cold, so you should sit in the sukkah. However, when we talk about be'ayune, when one is going to break their teeth to learn in an in-depth manner, for that, you need to go outside of the sukkah. Right? Why? So the assumption is that outside of the sukkah, a person will be able to concentrate better. Now, you and I are unfortunate to live in a climate where so often on Sukkot, the weather is very pleasant and beautiful. If you live in Eretz Yisrael, sometimes in the Sukkah, or like Florida or something, it could be sweltering hot. perhaps your sukkah is not the deluxe sukkah of the same way that they had the deluxe sukkahs back in the day when it was a much more cramped space. There's a split being made here between the learning, which is more, I would say, less taxing than the in-depth learning that really requires a great focus. So we're going to do a couple more lines, but then I want to dial back. I want to focus on this drop anchor here a little bit to try to understand a little bit more what is being spoken of here in this Gemara. So I think here again, it gives you a window into the approach to the mitzvah of Sukkah. Ki ha de Rava, should be de Rava, Bar Chama, ki havu kaimi mikmei de Rav Chizda, aman chavtet amad aleph. All right, mirati begemara bahade hadade, bahader ma'ayne besvara. When Rava was standing with Rami Bar Chana, that's actually it's both of those, Rava and Rami Bar Chana, when they were standing in front of Rav Chizda, so they were rushing through all of the learning that they already knew, that was clear to them. And after they went through the surface level, then they went back and started analyzing things in depth. That's how we learn today, yeah? First we learn the Mishnah, and then the Gemara starts picking away at pieces of the Mishnah as you're going deeper and deeper into the sugya to try to understand what it's about. So there's an example, a first layer and a second layer, meaning the first draft of learning, second draft, third draft, not in depth, just going through things. That's this case is not in the sukkah. This is stam. To show you there's a certain progression. You need the baseline of having perspective, the breadth, before you can explore the depth. So Amar Rava, manim mishtaya b'mitalata, manim michla bar mitalata. That which is associated with beverages, goblets, jugs, etc. All of that can stay inside the sukkah. However, that which is associated with foodstuffs, trays of food, pots, etc., that should be outside of the sukkah. Chatzva v'shachil bar mitulata. Rashi tells us those are lower end types of jugs. It's the actual earthenware jug that's used to scoop up the water from the well, or the wooden pail that is used for that purpose. Those are not objects that come into the sukkah. Ushraga b'mitilalata. The shraga means a small lamp, usually made of clay. Rashi tells us that. It's a ner shel cheres, and that would also be inside the sukkah. The amrila, some say bar mitalata. It should be outside the sukkah. There's no argument between these two positions. Ha besukkah gedola, ha besukkah kitana. One is in a large sukkah, one is in a small sukkah. So what's the distinction, big sukkah, small sukkah? Is it a fire concern? Is it other concerns? We'll get back to that hopefully a little bit later. Let me pause here. This was just the spade work to learn some of the surface level. I want to see some of the Rishonim if we can, but I want to make sure everyone's comfortable with what we're up to. Yeah? So again, the issue of sitting in the sukkah. Everybody, how do you make kind of mitzvah sukkah? You sit in the sukkah, eat in the sukkah, sleep in the sukkah. Good. Turns out there are other layers as well. What you bring into the sukkah and other activities that one would do in the sukkah. Does that extend to doing your work in the sukkah? A person has to go to work, but it's COVID-19, so they're in their sukkah at home. I see Ed Kaplan is in a sukkah right now. I didn't even notice it right now. Excellent. So you're in your sukkah. And in your sukkah, you want to learn Torah. Very nice, but not the heavy stuff. And what about work? Work's not very pleasant, but some people love the work that they do. So bring your office into the sukkah. I can't come into work. I'm in my sukkah. How far does it extend? Some of that is headquartered right here. Larry, you had a question. I'm sorry to keep you waiting.
The last few words were Habasukha Katana, Habasukha Gadola. Which is where?
Which is
in the Sukkah Katana and which is in the Sukkah Gadola?
Oh yeah, the point that some people say bring the lamp in. That's a big sukkah. Don't bring the lamp in. That's a little sukkah.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to see in the Rishonim some of the ideas. We'll only get that far. Let's look first about this idea about the learning. I found this to be very, very intriguing. Look at the first Rashi in the Gemara. So in Chav Chet Amud Bet 28b, third line down in Rashi. Umeshanin besukkah. Sover limuda umechatcho al borio. you already know what it is. You already have it sort of down pat. You're sort of just breaking it into component parts in order la'amod alav. It's to concretize it, to drill it down. But it's not really to analyze it in depth. Dahainu shmaita da amoroi usfar shel tame mishnu ubraita matan zechayev v'zeh patur zeh aser v'zeh mutter. You're trying to understand the learning and the dialogue among the Amoraim. And therefore, you want to understand the different opinions of how people understood the Mishnah and the Gemara. This one said Chayev, this one said Pater, this one said Aser, this one said Mutter. So this is just fascinating. Rashi had a book called the Gemara. So for Rashi, Umishanin Basukka, the baseline corpus that is included in that, in Mishanin, like the word Mishnah, is the Mishnah and, of course, the basic Gemara. For Rava, down on the bottom of the page, you had Mikra Umitna B'mitlata. It's the Mikra means Torah Shebichtav. Mitna is Torah Sheba'al Peh, which encompasses the work of the Tanaim. But Tanui is already, when you're getting more into it, that you're going to do outside. The Gemara had said the last word, Yune, Barim outside of the Sukkah. You follow? In other words, as the corpus of what Torah Sheba'al Peh of Chazal grows, so the later generations see that as much more of the baseline. I'll give you another analogy. The Rambam, somewhat controversially, also included this. The word Mishnah was like Mishnah and obviously Gemara too. And the word Gemara sounds like he's talking about some deep analysis and philosophy. And there were many who did not like that the Rambam said this in his Mishnah Torah, mind you. That some of Gemara was like some more in-depth learning. When we say the word Gemara, right? Gemara just means the learning. What's it the learning of? The explanation of? It's the explanation of the Mishnah. Every Mishnah has a Gemara. So every Sefer, you could say today, has a Gemara. It's the commentators on that book. But as the corpus grew, so the more basic element that one had to learn was itself larger. Rav Hershel Schachter Shlita makes this point from time to time that Jews should try to learn Kol HaTorah Kula. And he says, but obviously, people think every sefer that have been written is part of Kol HaTorah Kula. In a general sense, it's true. When we refer to Kol HaTorah Kula, it means the Taryag mitzvahs, and it means Shas. But it doesn't necessarily mean every single Rishon and Achron that ever lived, because obviously, if you're living in the 20th or 21st century, you're a much larger corpus than a person who lived in the 13th century. So it's true. Lahagdil Torah Lahadira, it is expansive. But the basic mitzvah is to learn, and he has a whole piece about, not if you're learning too much different Sifrei Kodesh that are like off the track, that's great, and it's enhancing your understanding, but it's not covering the basic corpus of what you need to learn. I will point out in this context that my Rebbeim, and not that Rav Schachter is not, but say Rav Lichtenstein, Zatzal, and Lahavli ben Chaim ben Chaim, Rabbi Rosenzweig, Michael Rosenzweig, and others, they champion much more the idea that learning has to be about learning things in depth, and as in-depth as possible, to try to analyze and to understand it. That's the key of Talmud Torah. Whether a person gets through all of Talmud Torah throughout their entire life, meaning learning all of Shas, that's not necessarily going to happen, necessarily. The book in the entire Sefer, but everything, but one should aspire, but that the goal is has to be mediated between the breadth and the depth, with a maybe more of a focus on depth, knowing things and knowing them well. Okay, not a resolved debate.
Can
Please
ask something? If you apply logic to the last statement about Sukkah Gdola and Sukkah Ktana, does it mean that the portable candle that you bring to the Sukkah, in a Sukkah Ktana, you keep outside, it doesn't include? which means it plays second to the kelim and matzaot and everything else. It's an extra.
The question is why? We'll get back to it. We'll get back to it. I'm focusing on the learning now, but hopefully on the learning issue in the Sukkah. But hold that thought. I hope we'll get back there tonight. Look at Rashi. Mikri umitne. Likrot shebichtav. Ulashanot mishnat haruchot ushgurot b'peh. Learn that which is in the scripture, i.e. in Tanakh, and to recite the mishnayot that are arrayed and that are well known in mouth. People know them. They know them well. B'mitalata basukah. Look at Rashi v'tanui. Hashas dehu svar litroch l'shane. When we're talking about the Shas, meaning now the Gemara, not just knowing who said what among the Amoraim, but now to understand the svars back and forth, litroach, to really toil in it and to sharpen it, that should be outside. V'chein shmait d'Amorai she'enan ba'ot el michlal dikduke she'ein lemedim mitoch divrei mishnah demidamo milta lemilta. So anytime there's a deep analysis by the Amoraim, so that's outside. But to know the basic shitas of who said what in the understandings of the Mishnah, that is permissible in the Sukkah. Look at Tosfot with me, the last Tosfot on the page. Umishanin b'Sukkah, levayer tam hamishnayot, to explain the rationale of the Mishnayot. Vainu hashas, and that actually means the Shas. See before where it said V'tanoi, Rashi said the Shas meant already delving into all the back and forth. That shouldn't be done in the Sukkah. That's already outside. So here, the Tosfot think that being mevayer, the understanding of the Mishnayot, is the Shas. Uparich, you could ask V'tanoi lebar mitulata, but shouldn't you do that outside of the Sukkah? Lefishet tzarich machshava v'rochav avir. You require deep thinking, and you require a certain expansiveness of mind that comes about from the atmospherics that are themselves conducive to the same. Umishanit b'Gemara nami yesh. Yeah, the Rashash added a word here, but I don't see it now on my page. Yeah, if you, on mine, there's a little letter chet that tells the Rashash added the word below iyun. Because otherwise it didn't make sense to me. And I finally looked up that chet. That's what I'm saying. I wanted to read it correctly. Umishad de Gemara nami yesh below iyun. In the Gemara, there could also be something that's not iyun. Kigon devar ploni asur umuter aval iyuni b'ta'ami bar misukah. The understanding of the rationale of the mechanics of what goes back and forth, that is something that one has to be kept out of the Sukkah. I mean, this is very straight. Like, you can learn, but don't overstrain yourself in the Sukkah. Why not? So it's not my question. It's actually a question that was asked by the various Rishonim. Among them, you have the Ritva and the Ran. I gave you the Ran. If you look on the screen, let's look together at the Ran. This is the Ran to this Gemara. So the Ran points out here. This is the section I'm going to be reading now, so you could look in. I hope it's big enough. Hold on. Good. Can people see the screen?
Much better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hanimili b'migras aval b'iyune b'svar l'bam talata. Right. So the Gemara had said, if it's just learning, stam learning, good. But if you want to go in depth, that's outside. The Gemara hachiita. The Gemara has answered it as follows: Look, hashi hab'migras hab'iyune. The Gemara said this one is for general learning. This one is for in-depth learning. Upirish Rashi Zal. This should not be here. On this margin here, it says that this word does not belong. Pirish Rashi Zal kedivir hariyaf means the rif. Zal Yitzchak Alfasi. Diune deitbe tircha bar mitalata. The mishun de mitztayerhu. You're gonna feel bad because the environment will not be conducive, and therefore you should be outside umitztar patim in a sukkah. Now, it's not exactly what Rashi said, but it's Rashi plus the Rif. The Ran amalgamated the two. the air outside will be more fresh, more conducive to thinking about the problems in depth. The Idamir, there are those who hold Ipcha, the exact opposite. The Ritva and the Ran is here. This is him. The Iyune, Hainu Keva. No, learning in depth, that is Keva. That is sitting and learning. Ubai Sukka. And Davka, you need a Sukka to learn Be'iyun. Ulechumra, Avid Ketarvayu. But to be Machmir, a person should do both. To sit in Sukkah for the easy learning, but of course, for the, so to speak, heavy learning, the heavy lifting. Kol heicha de lo mitrad, as long as it's not bothering you to sit in the sukkah. Aval imatrid, if it is de lo matrid, excuse me. Aval imatrid, if it is bothering you, it impedes your ability to learn. So havali mitzvah, put him in a sukkah. The Ran did not accept. The Ritva did not accept. The Ran quotes it. I didn't have the Ritva at home, so I didn't want to start looking it up. But this is the quote. Why should you say that the learning is too intense? I should leave my sukkah. I like to learn more in depth. I like to learn more in an intense manner. I'm going to sit in my sukkah. No problem. And it's just interesting that you have two poems both teased out of this Gemara. Rashi and Tosfot think sukkah is for light learning, nice, sweet. You're going to get in depth. It's going to make you crazy. Maybe atmospheric issues there. Go outside. You have the Rochav Ha'avir. But the Ran quoting the Ritva disagrees. And that's it. The word Ibcha means actually Het Lahefech. Exactly the opposite. The Iyune Hainu Keva. It's more important to learn in depth. That's the established learning. That's sitting and learning, if you will. Okay. I don't know how much you want to plug this into what I said a few minutes ago among the different rebbeim with the different shittas and approaches. I'm not sure I necessarily had it in mind as some kind of polemic, but it's something to think about. And I did get a comment. I don't know if it was to everyone or just to me, but I don't want to out the person if not. It was to everyone. I have very warm feelings towards the Daf Yomi program, even if I'm not personally doing it for various reasons of personal predilection and the like, but and style of learning. But I don't know if they would have a low opinion of Daf Yomi. I've never heard a criticism from any of my rebbeim directly about it. So I won't say. I don't know. And I didn't mean it as a critique of Daf Yomi either, by the by. The Yetzer Hara's one of its many tactics is you won't know what you're learning in Daf Yomi 5 days later, so why did you waste your time? You didn't waste your time. The kind of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah to sit and learn and to be engaged in learning. And if you retain something, you retain something. And if you didn't retain, so to go swimming in the ocean, you're also going to get wet. So go swimming in the Yam Shel Talmud. The Yetzer Hara tells a person, I shouldn't bother learning because I might not recall. Okay, fine. Kavata itim l'Torah is the test on the final, not what do you remember. So, okay, try your best. It shouldn't be not taken seriously, but I don't think it necessarily has to be only limud be'iyun. We're not going to see everything that's here. I just wanted to show you, laser focused on this issue. Shulchan Aruch Tafresh Lamed Tet Seif Daled. So this is practical for Sukkos. Kol Shivat Hayamim Korei in brackets Vilomade B'toch HaSukkah. All 7 days you should read and learn inside the sukkah. The Bayer Heitev quotes V'Akol Afiyeh, and everything's according to the topic. Im yesh lo menucha b'sukkah lomeid b'sukkah. If he's resting in the sukkah, so you should you can stay in the sukkah. But tzarach you have to understand it's a little bit more in depth. What if you need a lot of books? In tzarach sfarim harbe v'torach lo lahalotum l'sukkah. You don't want to carry a mountain of books each time to the sukkah. So maybe you don't want to. That's not pleasing to you. So there's the Bayer Heitev writes v'yesh lahachmir. One should be more machmir. Next page.
But didn't we already learn before? Tashuvu kein taduru. We already learned that.
Yeah, but if you didn't have this svarim in your house, would you move them house to house? The Magen Avraham should be machmer. The Lavush says here, Mashim de'ein tzarach lotem l'sham. Lavush says contemporary of the Ramah. The Lavush. He says if you don't have them in your sukkah, you don't have to bring them into the sukkah. Kimo gabe karim. It's like with pillows and stuff. You have to go to your friend's sukkah for that reason to go eat. If something happens to your sukkah, we'll come to that. That's not for tonight. Back up here, we mentioned this. You should learn in your sukkah. Shulchan Aruch. I should have finished Shulchan Aruch. Uchshemevin umedaktek b'mashi yikrav yilmod yachal limod chutz l'sukkah k'dei shtei daitum yushevet alav. But if you're trying to understand and understand things really in depth and what you're learning, and you're allowed to learn outside of the sukkah, so that your mind will be more settled. Huh? So if you look at the Mishnah Brura, no, it's over here. Sorry to make everyone dizzy. Uchshemevin medaktek, says the Mishnah Brura, wrote Salomar da'az tov lo yoter l'ilmod b'bayit. Then it's better for the person to be sitting in the house to learn. They're better off. Sheyesh l'menucha sham. Sorry, V'datim Yisrael b'sukkah. No, I skipped something. Excuse me. Da'az tov yoter l'ilmod b'bayit. She'avir yafil l'harchiv daito. The air will be better there for them to have an expansive sense of mindfulness about what they're doing. Miu shevet alav. V'akol fi'ein, and everything's according to the context. The Bayer Hate, they've quoted this. Sometimes very cold in the sukkah. You don't have to stay in the sukkah if it's painful to be in the sukkah because of cold. Not necessarily the case with food, but it's true with learning. It could be a really potter. But if you have a bookshelf somehow in your sukkah, so very nice. You should bring the Sfarim up to the sukkah, and you'll have it there. You'll have it for yourself. The next clause in the Shulchan Aruch is really striking. Hamitpalel ratza mitpalel b'sukkah or chutz l'sukkah. If you're davening, you can daven in the sukkah or out of the sukkah. Why aren't you going to shul? So did maybe Shulchan Aruch prefigured something about a plague? I don't know. Could be. It could be. It's not impossible. There was a plague in Tzfat in the 1500s. Rabbi Yosef Karo was living there. 3 years before Rabbi Yosef Karo died, the Arizal died of a plague. In Tzfat, in the middle of Av, on the 5th day of Av, in 1572. So here writes the Mishnah Brura, wrote Salomar de be'ezem makom sheish lo menucha yoter litpal b'chavana shamit palal. If you happen to be at home, go to the place where you have the most kavana. V'imhaya lo beit knesset be'ira maniach sukkot v'holich lo beit haknesset. She came b'shar yom Hashanah gam came maniach dirato v'holich lo beit haknesset. So just to consider, it's actually a question. Like there's a havamina maybe on sukkahs. My relationship to my sukkah is I have to learn there, so maybe I should actually stay there for davening too. Kamash Malan, Mishnah Brura Proskins, if you have a shul, you should really go to shul. Okay. Then it points out v'havdalah mavdil b'sukkah, even though you're not making a bracha of leishev. Shekain kol hashana mavdil b'veito, and there's no leishev on havdalah. Nonetheless, a person should go into the sukkah for havdalah from Yontif and Shabbos Chol Hamoed. So it's just you consider the halachas about learning, and you find out that there's actually a discrepancy that in the end turns on a subjective question of how do I internalize the sitting and learning per se. Is it pleasant to me? Is it easy to me, or is it a challenge for me? So that's Aleph. Bet, I wanted to show you one other thing in the Shulchan Aruch. If I actually gave you the copy, I hope. I neglected to put in all the 3 pages. That's too bad. All right. Well, there was another page that I thought I had scanned for you, which was about what you bring into the sukkah. I'm sorry. It's a mistake on my part because I really did want to share it. Too bad. Okay. Forgive me. You can listen in. Ketzad mitzvah yeshiva b'sukkah. Shei ochel v'shota v'yashen u'metayel v'dar b'sukkah kol shivat yamim bein b'vein b'layla. What's the mitzvah of sukkah? Is eating, drinking, sleeping, walking around to the extent that one can do so. Living in the sukkah the 7 days, day and night. Yederach shu dar b'veita b'shar yom HaRashana, the way you would live in your house the rest of the year. V'chol shevi yamim od sa'adam et beito arrive at sukkato keva flip it so that your house is a temporary dwelling and your sukkah is your fixed dwelling. Ketzad. How do you signify that you've done that? Kelim hanaim umatzaot hanaot basukkah. Uchlei shtia kigon ashishot v'chosot. So anything having to do with glasses and jugs and decanters, they shall be brought to the sukkah. Nice mattresses, nice vessels. Aval klei achila la'achar achila. The Torah added the words to Shulchan Aruch. If it's food trays, things of that nature, after eating, when the tray is just left on the table, it should not be left there. Kederu ke'arot. But he adds, it refers to pots and trays, namely that you would probably cook on. That's chutz l'sukkah. And then he throws in hamanora basukkah. Bring the lantern or the light source into the sukkah. If it's a small sukkah, then you leave it outside. And that's the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah just adds, "V'al yaseh shum tashmish bazui basukkah, kidei shelo yihu mitzvot bezuyot alav." Don't do anything in the sukkah that is considered a denigrating activity. Mishnah Berurah says whether it's washing dishes, you can rinse out glassware, but you shouldn't wash dishes in the sukkah if you had a sink in there. It points out, for anyone from back in the day before there was indoor plumbing, a person could not urinate in a sukkah, even though you had a chamber pot in your house. You would not be allowed to do that in the sukkah, etc. So I wanted to focus us a little bit on the question of the lantern and the light question that Judah had asked about previously, trying to understand the big sukkah, the small sukkah, and whatnot. So to understand it a little bit more, let's say in depth, the first step was, before we get there, I don't know if we'll get that far tonight, is just to try to appreciate that we're using electric lights. Obviously, the light bulb was invented in 1879. Before then, everybody had to use some kind of fire, but you could have, and the Mishnah points out, if you had even a lantern that was covered with glass, or a lampa, or a lanterna, uses those words actually, so that would be permissible even with an open flame, possibly even in a smaller sukkah as well. How small a sukkah are we talking about? So if you look at at Rashi on page 29a, sukkah katana is actually literally the smallest possible dimension of a sukkah. It's 7 tfachim by 7 tfachim. So shel shir mitzumtzum zayin tfachim asur lahanichem betocha. One may not place I'm on page 29a, and I'm about 10 lines down or so in the narrow lines of Rashi. Second word in. Second word in. Sukkah katana shel shir mitzumtzum zayin tfachim. So it's so small, you're not allowed to put it inside. Now, some of the Rishonim say, what did Rashi mean? He meant that if your sukkah is 7 by 7, there's a fire hazard. Some say, no, it's not that it's a fire hazard. It's a tiny little lamp. It's tiny. The problem is you're taking up space in a sukkah that has no space in it. Remember, you're in a sukkah. 7 by 7 means Rosh Haruv Shulchano. We pointed out already, the shulchan is like the sushi plate. It's literally 1 tefach in width, and it's right in front of your body to make it into the sukkah. Remember, because we had that discussion about what if your shulchan, that was the Gemara with the Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel going to visit in the home of one of the Chachamim, when his table was outside, he's reaching outside. Remember? So we had that story was, what was it, 28a, right? So then one group said to the other, if that's how he's doing his sukkah, he wasn't fulfilling the mitzvah ever in his life. That was 28a. That was the story. So some of the Rishonim think that's the problem. You cannot have this little object inside because it's taking up too much space. It's so mitzumtzam, it's just enough for one human being at the same time. Okay. I forgot something. I'm sorry. As I looked up just now and I saw Tosfot, Rashi had already pointed out the kelim that can go into the sukkah are those which are not disgusting. They're not vile to a person to have sitting on the table. So a pitcher and and glasses, glassware, stemware, that's fine. When we talk about dirty trays and things like that, you would take that off the table. You wouldn't leave it there as an item. It still has food on it. It's functional. But not to bring the pot right off the fire. If you wouldn't bring it to your dining room, you put it out there. You know what I mean? That's the idea. A related story here is also not to bring a garbage pail into the sukkah. Like a lot of people think it's, especially if you're using the highest level, I think Ed was one to point out before, the highest level of the paper goods, the plastic. So at least carry it out of the sukkah to throw it out, not to bring the bag inside. The same way that in a fancy banquet hall, a person would not do that. The same kind of idea with the kelim. But look at Tosfot Chav Tet Amud Aleph at the top. Mana de Michla, foodstuffs. Ke'aret la'achar she'achlu behen tzarech l'hotziyam min hasukkah. When you finish eating from them on the trays, take them out. The serving plate, mishum mius, doesn't look nice. Kach pirish bekuntris. But Tosfot points out, v'yesh mefarshim, it's not necessarily the tray that no longer has the chicken on it, but maybe kidgon kederot ve'agne delisha. What we're talking about is actual pots that you cook with, cauldrons. Bring the soup with a tray, with a trivet. You plunk it down in the pot on the table. So that's what it means. And not to bring the kneading bowls that one would use for kneading dough. But time of ain tadura ba'inan. V'hana in regilin liot bebeit dira. Ella bait yeshlam levadam. These items typically are not brought into the house where people live. They all live in one-room houses. They have their own little house, their own little area where they stay. V'chipirish bahag al halach gedolot. Gigon kadre ushpudi beitafi. All different cooking implements. The spud is a spit. I don't remember what the beitavi and the beitafi are right now. Forgot. They're also cooking implements that it would not really be brought to a table per se. So it's the Bali Toast just pointing out that it doesn't have to mean that it's a tray that doesn't have any food left on it or very little food. It could be that it's referring really to the person brings their blender to the table. They bring their Cuisinart or whatever it is, the KitchenAid. That's not so appropriate. Okay, now back to the fire question. What does bar mitolata mean? You put if you keep the shraga, the light outside, it means the light is outside and it's shining into the sukkah. Again, Tosfot over here, and Tosfot has a very interesting shita. V'amri, not only is my approbation or anything, but let's look at it inside. V'amri labari mitolata ein shraga me'inyana de acherim de mana de michla bar mitolata. The issue with the fire is not the same issue as it is with things that are not nice to bring into the sukkah. Hainu b'shah she'ein mishtamish bahen the b'shat seuda ochel b'ka'ara basukah. When you're using the food tray, you can bring it into the sukkah. The point was not to leave it, at least according to that opinion, which is really Rashi's opinion, not to leave it sitting there, but you're using it. Aval shraga. But in the case of this small fire, this lamp, the prohibition in the small sukkah is even while it's being used. It's not a question that it's not nice. There's some other reason. As we will learn further along in a later parak of this Masachta. Ditnan, it teaches there, Gabi Shvi Shel Chag, 7th day of Sukkot, and Hoshana Rabbah. Unlike Chutz La'aretz, and Hoshana Rabbah and Eretz Yisrael, they actually have a real Preda Mina Sukkah, and they don't eat in it at all on Shmini Atzeret. But what happens? Gom milecho lo yatu sukkato. Mishum di imitrame le seudata achel begava. If it should so happen after you have lunch on Hoshana Rabbah that a guest will arrive later in the day, you may still need your sukkah. You're not allowed to undo the sukkah in the waning hours of Hoshana Rabbah afternoon. Aval, Morida kelim and mincha ulamala mipnei kavod yom tov. You're allowed, however, I added the word yom tov because that's yom tov ha'achron, excuse me, right? You're allowed, however, to take the kelim from the sukkah into the house. Why is that so symbolic? Because you're getting ready for Shmini Atzeret, and you don't live necessarily, certainly not in the days of Tosfot, where you have your fancy things for the sukkah and your fancy things for the house. You have maybe one set of everything. Zemayesh. So you're getting ready for the Yom Tov Achron, it means Shmini Atzeret. So you take the things from the sukkah objects, kalim, you're going to use, and you remove them from the sukkah. You haven't touched the structure of the sukkah, but as we just saw previously in the Mishnah and the Gemara, that's a signal that I'm moving out. I move the furniture out. I move the utensils out and the like. Shemara kemechin atzmo likrato lemakom shisod sham halayla. We don't do this in chutz la'aretz because we also, according to the Gemara at least, are meant to eat in the sukkah on Leil Shmini Atzeret and the day of Shmini Atzeret afterward. And of course, many of us don't because of the Chassidish minhag, which we won't go into right now. That's on Daf Nun Vav or thereabouts. So the Gemara says, well, what if the person had nowhere to put the kalim? They just didn't have space. V'tzarich le'echol sham b'yom tov ha'achron. What if you had to eat in your sukkah on Shmini Atzeret because you didn't have room in your house for whatever reason? It was really your dirat keva now. Mayase v'yochiach she'eno kemosif ala mitzvah la'asot sukkah shmona yamim. Remember, there's a mitzvah in the Torah. Appears, according to some, it's codified in Parshat Va'etchanan. According to others, such as the Chinuch and others, it's codified in Parshat Re'eh. One is not allowed to add to the mitzvahs. And specifically, the Torah said 7 days sit in the sukkah. You may not sit on the 8th day. That's Baal Tosif. Right? Daled minim, you can't have 5 minim. 4 parshiyot, you can't have 5 parshiyot. They're classic examples. So what will you do to signify, I am not sitting in a sukkah now, I am sitting in a hut that's providing shade and enabling me to have dinner, but it's not actually a sukkah? Answer is the Gemara, quoted here by Tosfot, Madlik baraner. You light a little candle. Umi dechashiv la hekera b'shat hadlaka shma, and the fact that the act of lighting itself is for the purpose of showing I am not sitting in a sukkah, shma mina da'asr b'chag. We learned that it would be prohibited on the holiday to have lit a fire in the sukkah. So it's the Baal Tosfot. So maybe the rationale here is that we're talking really about a sukkah ketana, and that's the issue. And we're worried that maybe the guy will burn down his sukkah. By the way, some of the Rishonim on Tosfot, maybe it's that Chronim, I don't remember now what it is, say, well, maybe the real issue is the guy's going to be afraid he's going to burn down his sukkah. He's not actually going to. He's afraid he's going to. Therefore, he's not going to light properly or something. But Teda de hadlaka davka. You see that it actually is the act of hadlaka itself. Midolonakat me'ayil et haner. Since we don't hear about bringing up the ner into the sukkah, kidanakit hatam me'ayil ba mane michla. We learn about the foodstuffs. You prepare the food inside, but you bring it out to the sukkah. So we don't hear that about this case with the shraga. Therefore, the lighting of the fire itself would be a sign that one is not really sitting in a sukkah. Rav Elyashiv, I saw quoted on the here on the this beautiful Madura Dirshu. So Rav Elyashiv points out one should light the Shabbos candles, the Yontif candles, Shabbos candles in the sukkah if you're eating in the sukkah, assuming you have a sukkah gedola, not a sukkah ketana, not like Tosfot. But the point of Tosfot is, look, there's some signal about the fire being lit in there that it's like a lowly activity. Ed asked a very good question. Sorry, I just outed you by accident, so I said privately. Yes, if you just say a bracha, you can signify you're not living there on the 8th day, but then if you're living there on the 8th day, you're in trouble. In other words, the bracha is not what causes the kiyum per se. And we're concerned about a Baal Tosif consideration. By the by, that's why the Gemara, the compromise fly for Chutz La'aretz, again, I think it's on Nun Vav, is the Gemara will say about Shmini Atzeret, Meitav Yatvinan Ubruchi Lo Mevarchinan. On the night of Shmini Atzeret, you sit in the sukkah, don't make a bracha on sitting in the sukkah. So you just skip the bracha, but you sit in it to sort of get around this Baal Tosif problem. Yeah? But in Eretz Yisrael, if you're stuck and you have to be in there, you can't say, well, it's Tzvika D'Yom, and it might really be the 7th day of Sukkot, so you can't really be in there. But if you're totally stuck, so the quote from the Gemara elsewhere is to light a candle inside the sukkah. That shows you can't be sitting in sukkah because you're not supposed to light candles in the sukkah. Again, the Achronim don't pick up this Tosfot and basically do say, if you're lighting for Yontif, so you should light in the place where you're going to eat, assuming that it's safe to do so.
If someone didn't have room in their regular house, a practical fix it might be to just remove some of the schach so it's no longer a kosher sukkah. You wouldn't be chayav
Right. The problem. Yeah, that is also, by the way, that is a discussion further along. If a person's stuck and they do that to the schach, but we're going to get to that actually when we talk about like Shmini Atzeret. They actually Rishonim talk about this also. People doing things to make, possible schach. The problem is if it's actually already Yontif, so you're allowed to be soter something on Yontif.
No.
So
but
how close to Yontif? It has to be like right before Yontif. Is that like a sign? So that's a discussion further along.
It's a problem.
Yeah, on Yontif. But let's say right before Yontif. But there is going to be a discussion. Whatever parak it's in now, I don't remember. It's
I thought until the seventh day of Sukkot ends, it's all muktzah.
Yeah, but the problem is the sun is setting the seventh day. It's about to set. It's about to go into the eighth day. And now I'm going to need the sukkah space, but I'm not allowed to sit in a sukkah. So the question is going to be, what can I do to signify I'm not sitting in the sukkah now? In Chutz La'aretz, like Eddie said, skip the bracha of Leishav Basukkah. Because you can't say Leishav Basukkah on the eighth day. If it's really the eighth day, you're not allowed to be in the sukkah. If it's really the seventh day, you really have to be in the sukkah. So you're stuck in a no man's land. The Gemara says, Meitav Yatvina Bruchlim Avarchinan. Sit, but don't make a bracha. But there are other ideas that are brought up as well about ways, perhaps, to passel the sukkah if you're stuck. And of course, that will beg the question when we get there of, wait a minute, isn't the huksa l'mitzvato? So does that expire? Or is there a superseding consideration when you need to prepare for the next day's yontif? Case in point, the kalim on the seventh day in the afternoon are already being removed from the sukkah. How could they be removed? So you need it for yontif. That's Tosfot had said here. Of a morida kelim and minchul amat ne kavod yom tov ha'acharon shemara kimeichin atzim likrato l'makam sheisod sham halayla, the place where you're going to eat the meal at night. And I just looked at the clock. I see I'm 7 minutes over. I've overstayed my welcome.
יש גם שאלה, מדליק את הנר אם זה לכבוד שמיני עצרת. In other words, designate that Sukkot is over and you light the candle.
Lighting the candle, davka for, inachinami. Yeah. All right, we of course we're out of time. I wanted to show you some things in the Rishimot Shiur of Rav Soloveitchik, but okay, there's always next week. I have to whet your appetite to come back to see the beautiful formulations of Maran Hagrid, Rav Yosef Dov Levi Soloveitchik. So God willing, join me next week, same time, 8:00. Now Mincha Ma'ariv is getting earlier, so we'll say 8:00 next week and the following week, and then it's going to be the week of Slichas. So we'll have to go on hiatus, but if all goes well, which is always a big if, I'm hoping we're going to finish Perek Sheni in honor of the new year. And that will start Lulav Hagazol, which is one of the great prakim of yeshiva learning. We'll get to that, God willing, in the new year. Habalin Tov Tafshin Pei Aleph. Okay, Ad Khan for tonight.
I want to tell everybody should listen. I just found out